British Empire began colonizing in the 16th century when they began to settle in North and Central America. India, Canada, and Australia soon followed in being colonized, and in the early 19th century, the British turned to Asia, specifically China, to trade for silk, porcelain, and most importantly, tea. However, the Chinese would only trade in silver, and over the years, the British Empire depleted most of their reserves. The British had come up with a solution, however, and begun selling opium illegally to Chinese citizens in return for silver. The British had been selling opium to the Chinese for many years, but the amount had increased as they came into the 19th century, and as a result, opium addiction became widespread throughout China. As an attempt to curb this, government official Lin Zexu in 1839 disposed of about 1,300 tons of opium. The British did not take well to this and responded by sending military ships to the port of Canton. The First Opium War officially began in November of that year, when British warships attacked and sank 29 Chinese ships as the British people in the city of Canton were evacuated. In 1841, after heavy losses by the Chinese, the admiral of the Chinese fleet, Quan Ti, called for a ceasefire. This agreement was the one that gave the British Hong Kong Island, which would later be returned to China, but not until the end of the 20th century. The Chinese continued to be defeated as the British fleet moved to Shanghai and Qingqiang, and after successfully capturing both cities, the Chinese surrendered. After nearly 3 years of fighting, the Treaty of Nanking was signed on the 29th of August, 1842. The Chinese had been beaten by the British terribly, and after signing the unequal treaty, the British gained both power in trade and power in the country itself, as British officials were placed in port cities, and British nationals were presented with extraterritoriality. Failure to comply with the Treaty of Nanking led to the Second Opium War, along with the decline of the Qing dynasty. The First Opium War had shown the weakness of the Qing army, and an uprising, the Taiping Rebellion, had begun. Although it was unsuccessful, it further continued the decline of Qing China. The Chinese people did not take well to the British commercialization of their homeland, and in addition to the British, the Russian Empire, Republic of France, and the United States of America had begun trying to make their own money off Chinese trade. In 1856, the British ship Arrow was stopped by Chinese authorities. The sailors, who were not British nationals, were detained. After refusal to release all of the sailors from the Chinese, the British began to once again attack Canton. British troops were meant to arrive in Canton, but were instead deployed to fight against the Indian Mutiny, and arrived at China much later than planned. After the Arrow incident, riots ensued, killing many Europeans and destroying European property. A French missionary had been killed in the process, and before the British troops arrived from India, the French decided to aid the British on their conquest. Canton fell quickly, and a treaty was once again signed, allowing for Western nations to access more ports and for opium to be legalized. While en route to ratify these treaties in 1859, the Chinese stopped the British and company at the Taku forts, and they were unable to advance to Peking, and fighting began once again. British, French, and American troops were ordered to wait for the envoys, but the troops pushed forward anyway, and, for this, suffered a heavy defeat, and the British and French armies, the most powerful in the world at the time, took a hit to their ego. The Chinese victory was short-lived, however. Over the next couple of months, the British took over the Taku forts. By September, and defeated the Chinese regiments just outside of Peking and Palikao. The summer palace of the emperor was located on the outskirts of Peking, which the British and French forces looted, stealing silk, porcelain, pottery, and other priceless items. After it had been sufficiently robbed, troops burned it to the ground and continued on to Peking. The burning, ordered by High Commissioner James Bruce, was punishment for the killing of British captives by the Chinese. To ensure their message was clear, artillery was prepared to fire on the city of Peking. At this threat, the emperor ran, leaving his brother, Prince Gongquinwang, to settle with the Europeans. Chinese forces surrendered, and the Europeans rushed into the city. On the 24th of October, 1861, the Second Opium War concluded. Opium was legalized in China, and Chinese Christians were given full rights. The Qing dynasty had suffered another heavy blow, and their hold on China continued to weaken. The 19th century became to be known in China as the century of humiliation.